Hello, I'm Riz Khan. Today we take you on a remarkable journey through the Central African nation of Zaire. Zaire is potentially one of the world's richest nations, with immense reserves of diamonds, cobalt, and other valuable natural resources. But this vast nation, with borders on no less than 9 other African states, now lies in shambles after years of corruption and mismanagement by its political leaders. Sadly, a situation not uncommon to the African continent. The people of Zaire are among the world's poorest, and for most of them, every day is a desperate struggle just to survive. Running through Zaire is a mighty river formerly known as the Congo, and it's on this river and along its banks that thousands of people use their skills and wits to try to eke out a living against overwhelming odds. Today, we'll follow some of them down the river and take a rare look at Africa from the inside. Our guide for this adventure is CNN's Gary Stryker, who now takes us down the dark river.
Welcome to the river. The river that swallows all rivers, the river Zaire, once known as the Congo. The river, an endless supplier of food. The people taking what they need to survive. In the lower reaches of Stanley Falls, fishermen build scaffolding and hang baskets to catch fish. Along the Zaire River, scenes like these are timeless, unchanged for thousands of years. But this tranquility disappears just a few miles downriver. On the docks in Kisangani, hundreds of traders sell almost anything from the river and forest. A supermarket stocked with the staples of Central African menus. Lots of fish, fresh and smoked, fruits and vegetables, and some items that might disturb sensibilities of outsiders, like smoked monkeys, crocodiles, and juicy palm grubs, sometimes eaten raw but usually fried. There's a carnival atmosphere in this market. It attracts a big crowd because it only happens here for a few days about once a month, when the riverboat comes to town. The Colonel Ibeya is a creaking, rusty veteran on this river, owned and operated by Zaire's government. Aside from a few private vessels, it's the primary means of transport connecting this region to the rest of the country. Kisangani is the 4th largest city in Zaire, but it is now virtually impossible to get here by road. 30 years ago, there was a good network of roads across this vast nation, but decades of neglect have changed that. If you cannot afford to fly to Kisangani, you come here on the river. And on the river, this is as far as you can get. Beyond Kisangani, navigation stops at the cataracts, where fishermen hang their baskets. Almost everyone selling in this market has arrived on the boat, loaded down with merchandise they've carried on the long trip upriver. It's now time for this market to shut down, time for the traders to get back on board. The Colonel Ibeya is almost ready to leave, ready to turn back and head for Kinshasa, 1,000 miles downriver. But before it leaves, the boat morphs into something much bigger. 4 barges are lashed onto the front and sides, forming a sprawling contraption with a huge capacity for passengers and cargo. And as we will discover, every bit of that capacity will be needed on this journey. The Colonel Ibeya will leave Kisangani with about 800 passengers, but by the time it reaches the capital, Kinshasa, there could be several thousand on board this floating city. With the barges secured and the gangplank pulled away, only a few minutes are left for the last passengers to jump on board. As we wave goodbye to those left behind, we wonder how long this journey will take. We're told at least a week, maybe much longer. Because there's always what they call here l'imprévu, the unexpected. Hidden rocks and sandbars, fires on board, and sinking barges.
Comme commandant titulaire, oui.
Captain Louis Bella has worked on this river for 28 years, starting as an apprentice crewman. But this is his first trip as captain, his first command. In the wheelhouse, he studies his charts, as weather-beaten as the boat itself.
Je tiens à ce que le bateau arrive à bon
It's
port.
always my hope that the boat arrives safely, he says. But sometimes things happen. Some people get sick. Some people die. But with my experience, I'm sure things will go well. But experience has taught those who navigate these waters, you can never be too careful. Especially because an antiquated radio system is the only communication link with company headquarters in the capital. The Colonel Abea was launched more than 40 years ago under Belgian colonial rule. Since then, time has not been kind to it or to Zaire. Like many things in this nation, it suffers from neglect and abuse. The most pampered part of this vessel is below deck. Two 750 horsepower diesel engines with fuel tanks that hold 100,000 liters. More than enough, we're told, to make the more than 2,000-mile round trip from Kinshasa to Kisangani without refueling. That's important because there's no fuel to be had anywhere along the river. Once again, as it's done hundreds of times before, the Colonel Abea enters the main current and gains speed. On a river that was for centuries a mystery, for centuries a symbol of what the outside world saw as a dark continent, impenetrable, uncivilized, and unknown to outsiders. Until 1877, when the explorer Henry Stanley, crossing by land from East Africa, encountered a large river in the center of the continent and followed it to the Atlantic. The Congo was no longer a mystery, but it never lost its association with the dark forces of the human soul. As a private colony of the Belgian King Leopold II, the Congo was a brutal slave state, immortalized by Joseph Conrad in his book, Heart of Darkness. And after independence, the former Belgian Congo was infamous for shocking violence and bloodshed. Many say that's why Zaire's president, Mobutu Sese Seko, changed the name of his nation and its river to Zaire, to bury in the history books all those negative associations with the name Congo. But no matter what it is called, this is still the mightiest river in Africa. A river that flows nearly 3,000 miles, crossing the equator twice before it reaches the Atlantic. And when it finally reaches the ocean, this river discharges as much as 10 million gallons of water every second. That makes it almost the world's most powerful river, second only to the Amazon. Only a few miles out of Kisangani, we meet the first villagers, anxious to sell what they have to the traders on board. For more than a week and 1,000 miles, we'll follow this humongous river through the heart of the Central African rainforest. We'll follow the lives of those on board this remarkable community and learn how the river is still the key to survival in a nation that has crumbled to ruins. On this journey, there is much to learn about the world's poorest continent and the people who struggle to live here. A journey through lost hopes and dreams, through an entire society backsliding into the 19th century.
Next on Down the Dark River, price gouging for crocodiles and keeping law and order on the floating city.
To get ahead on the global fast track, it takes speed, strategy. You need all the options you can get. The U.S. Postal Service introduces Global Priority Mail. Fast, smart, and priced to give you an edge. So whenever you see an opportunity, you're ready. No one delivers like the U.S. Postal Service.
You told us what you want for breakfast, and while we're proud that for a lot of you that means one of our Post cereals, there's more to it than that. You also told us what you don't want. You don't want to pay an arm and a leg for any box of cereal. And you don't want to settle for second choice just because it's a better deal. So at the Post Cereal Company, we've lowered the price of every one of our cereals, every single day. We didn't make the boxes smaller or put less into them. And now our coupons are simple. They're good on any Post cereal. You choose what you want to buy. We think we're off to a good start, but really what you think is a lot more important. So our address and 800 number are on every box. We hope you'll use them. You see, the people at Post are pretty much like everyone else. We shop in the same supermarkets. We know what it's like. We think we're doing the right thing. Post. Breakfast made right.
Morning, guys.
Just when you think your diarrhea medicine is working,
Oh, boy. What's wrong?
it can let you down. But you can count on Imodium AD to stop diarrhea, often in just one dose, instead of dose after dose, more than a third of a bottle of the pink stuff. And Imodium AD is even better than the leading prescription.
I told you we should have stopped for Imodium AD.
Imodium AD, one dose relief you can count on.
I knew I couldn't teach you the balance beam or the parallel bars, but I tried to teach you to believe in yourself. And though I can't be there today, and I've told you 1,000 times, I'm so, so proud. And I just wanted you to know now.
Motorola, what you never thought possible.
Log on to CNN Interactive for the latest news, direct from the CNN newsroom. Rated #1 among all basic cable websites. With business from CNN FM, the new financial network from CNN. Sports scores and highlights from Nick and Fred. Fashion and interior design with Elsa. Entertainment news from Lauren and Jim. The whole world of CNN on the World Wide Web. We're here 24 hours a day at CNN.com.
Along the river, villagers specialize in what they trade. And on this stretch, for miles and miles, it's crocodiles. A small croc can command a good price down in Kinshasa. You buy it here for only 50 cents, tie its mouth shut so it can't do any damage, and keep it alive until the end of the trip. An easy profit. But first, you have to beat the competition just to buy it. And competition is fierce. There's competition everywhere on the Colonel Abaya, especially among traders, whose stalls are well stocked with goods in high demand by customers downriver. Everything from clothing to shoe tacks, needles and threads, batteries, pharmaceuticals, margarine, condoms, and basic provisions. Hubert Kirongogi, who supports a wife and 3 children, is one of the many traders on board. For 12 years, he's been traveling up and down river, often fighting the unpredictable elements. Buying and selling fish, clothing, palm grubs, and the staple food of Central Africa, manioc root. It's good, he says. You soak it for 3 days in water. Most people here eat this. Working on the river for 3 years now, Ilongo Wivine is also a fixture on this boat, where she trades in wax-designed cloths for women, jewelry, and soap. Every journey is different, she explains. A couple of months ago, I had a really good trip and made $100 after paying my ticket and other expenses. This is Odette Molebo's first trip on the Colonel Abea, and she's brought her one-year-old daughter Lillian with her. Odette will sell fried pastries and plans to buy fish. She's got a prime location for her stall on a busy corner of a barge. But is this the future she wants for her child? No, she says. I could never tolerate my daughter working under these conditions. Business on this boat is not only wholesale and retail. The Colonel Abea is also a slaughterhouse and a finishing plant where many items are processed and packaged, including pharmaceuticals. On the river, hundreds of miles from the nearest mission clinic or hospital, this man will find willing buyers even for outdated tetracycline. In this vast forest wilderness, what people fear most is disease. Most people on board cannot even afford to buy a tiny bag of clean well water. In much of Africa, deadly parasites and viruses are the major killers, especially among children. After only one day's journey, the Colonel Abea has already suffered one tragedy. A small girl has died of fever, and she's been buried in this town's cemetery. Now our destination is still 1,000 miles downriver. There are prayers for the child who died, and more prayers for the safety of everyone on this journey. The people of Zaire are deeply spiritual, overwhelmingly Christian. With the breakdown of government services across the nation, Christian missionaries provide essential medical care and education. More than ever in these difficult times, people put their trust in religion. In the dispensary on the main barge, Knox Lilando has worked for 20 years as the supervising nurse. Today, he treats a patient with first-degree burns. He has some basic medical supplies, including sterile syringes, which he says are thrown into the river after they're used, along with all other medical waste and garbage. There's a lot of malaria here, he says, a lot of diarrhea, gastroenteritis, sometimes even epidemics of cholera. It's troubling to think of cholera spreading in these crowded conditions, especially troubling when we're told there's a cholera epidemic downriver, exactly where we're headed. A call to lunch in the boat's first-class dining hall, where a few dozen privileged passengers enjoy one of the benefits of a $200 boat ticket. In its heyday, the Colonel Abea was sumptuous on the first-class deck. Starched tablecloths, polished silverware, and fine champagne, now a distant memory. But the stewards and waiters still do their best to make first class something special. Though many first-class passengers still prefer to cook their own meals outside their private cabins. Down in the kitchen for second and third class, huge pots of food are always boiling. But we hear stories about past journeys where scores of people have died after these meals, which might explain why many second and third class passengers also cook their own food. Third class on the barges is mostly do-it-yourself. Find your own space anywhere you can, make your own shelter, and if you cannot afford food from the kitchen, what you eat is up to you. On the Colonel Abea, only the elite can afford first and second class. Like most African societies today, there is virtually no middle class. Across Africa, most people's living standards have been declining for decades. The World Bank says 1 African in 3 now lives in dire poverty. There are many on board who can't afford a $15 third-class ticket, but they try to steal a ride anyway. Checking everyone on the boat and barges for tickets, security men find the usual number of stowaways. They'll be dropped off at the next port and thrown in jail for a few days, A small price to pay for some of them who wanted only a short ride downriver anyway. So did these boys, who abandoned ship while they have the chance. A suspected thief is caught by the boat's security guards, and they deal with him in the usual way. Justice is swift and severe on the Colonel Abea, and there are few crimes committed on this boat. At the top of the pyramid, the captain and his crew. None of these men earns more than a few dollars every month from his wages. But on the Colonel Abea, they're the power elite. Like President Mobutu, who is often called the helmsman of the nation, Captain Bella is the supreme authority on board, ruling with fatherly concern for those beneath him, but always on the lookout for a good deal. Everyone on the crew, from the captain to the mechanic in the engine room, will exploit his privileged position to make money, selecting the choicest items for themselves. In Zaire, you survive not on wages or salaries, but on gratuities, bribes, and black market deals. It's not how much you're paid for your job that matters, it's what you can do with it for yourself. Passing these villages brings to mind how the explorer Stanley described his adventure here. Stanley had more than 100 men in his party, well armed with rifles. But almost every day on the river, he was attacked by warriors in canoes. In Stanley's words, they were savage and ferocious to an extreme degree. But to the people along this river, Stanley was a dangerous threat. They thought he was a slave trader, and they were defending their villages. Armed only with spears, bows, and arrows, they were easy sport for Stanley, like shooting fish in a barrel. As we traveled downriver, there seemed to be fewer villages on shore, and the rainforest appears to close in even tighter. But every mile brings more canoes, people streaming from villages on rivers and creeks we can't even see. All of them with something to sell and a shopping list of things to buy. As the sun sets, there's no stopping this commerce. For those who've waited weeks for a chance to do business here, sundown is no excuse to miss the boat. All through the night, non-stop wheeling and dealing. The Colonel Abea is truly a city that never sleeps, with a few exceptions.
Next on Down the Dark River, the bounty of the rainforest and hedging the ravages of inflation.
If you were to come to Texas to visit me, I will take you to see some real cowboys, just the way you see them in the movies. Then I will take you to see some beautiful wildflowers. Let's go fishing, okay? We happen to have the best beaches you can find. Beautiful, beautiful. If I'm going to take you shopping, let's go to Houston. Also, let's go to Dallas.
If you want to know why Texas is like a whole other country, just ask one of our 18 million ambassadors.
For everybody out there gifted with a photographic memory, I present the new 272-page Texas Travel Guide. Exciting, huh? Hope you enjoyed reading it.
Of course, if you don't have a photographic memory, we'll send you a free copy. Just call 1-800-8888-TEX.
Tonight, it's an hour of Washington's friends and foes. First, the Capitol Gang gets together to look at the week in Washington. Then, get caught in the crossfire with Lynn Cheney and Bob Beckel. Friends and foes back to back, tonight on CNN.
On the next National Geographic Explorer, wild horses in the desert. They do the impossible every day. They survive. Wild Horses of Namib. National Geographic Explorer, 9 Eastern tonight. Turn to TBS.
This is the place to turn for entertainment news live from New York and Hollywood. This is CNN.
Make a splash with 2 great channels in July.
It's a wonderful story.
Stars and Encore.
They want it now.
Stars, a better movie channel. And Encore, hit movies of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Don't miss it on Stars and Encore, 2 great movie channels.
Golly gee, a single tear rolls down my cheek.
See the movie everyone's talking about at home on pay-per-view.
Why are you killing yourself?
Best actor Nicolas Cage gives a blazing performance.
Never ask me to stop drinking.
Elizabeth Shue is even more astonishing.
I need you.
Leaving Las Vegas was the year's only work of art. A daring original love story.
Well, that's what I want.
Leaving Las Vegas. Powerful entertainment. Delivered home on pay-per-view.
Find out who's in the Crossfire Sunday, tonight, 7:30 Eastern on CNN.
Every day on this journey, the abundance of what people take from the river and forest is awesome. A bewildering variety of fish, including giant catfish that can weigh more than 250 kilograms, nearly 600 pounds. There are chimpanzees and monkeys, crocodiles, eels, and antelope, birds like parrots and eagles. This one is destined for some witch doctor in Kinshasa. Its feet will be sold as powerful charms. The number of barnyard animals on board keeps climbing. Chickens, goats, and pigs everywhere. There are no inspectors here from the Humane Society looking out for the welfare of these animals, but neither will you find anyone looking out for the welfare of these people. No matter what you have to sell, just reaching the boat can be tricky. Traffic jams are common, and timing is critical. Too far away and you miss the boat entirely. Too close and you're swamped by the bow waves, losing everything you have. But if you're lucky and live in a town like Bumba, the boat will stop for a few hours and the market will come to you. For those who live along the river, this floating bazaar is a lifeline. For many, their only contact with the cash economy. For a short time here, the luxuries of the big city are sold in Bumba, especially clothing, much of it second-hand from Europe and the United States. Many people in the Western world don't know it, but most of the cast-off clothing they donate to charities eventually winds up for sale in markets like this in Africa. Another sign of Africa's deepening poverty. It's now common for Africans to dress themselves in hand-me-downs from the rest of the world. Mrs. Wivine tries to sell some of her new wax prints in Bumba, but no one will pay her price. She says she'll wait until Kinshasa, where people have more cash to spend. We head back to the Colonel Abea. As soon as we start moving downriver again, canoes swarm around the boat. Most of these people are desperate to tie alongside and spend just a few minutes on board. This is where the traders have the advantage, offering pathetically low prices for what the villagers have to sell. The villagers are pressured to accept the offers because the longer they bargain, the more time they spend on the moving boat, and the longer it will take to paddle back home upriver against the strong current. After closing a deal and collecting their money, the next step is to buy something fast. But for those who have little experience with money, how to spend it wisely can be a difficult decision. The inflation rate is not as high as it was 2 years ago, 6,000%, but the value of Zaire's money is always going down, virtually in front of your eyes. This has caused suffering everywhere in Zaire. A few years ago, soldiers rioted when Mobutu tried to pay the military with new banknotes they would not accept. This led to widespread anarchy and looting. And Zaire's economy has never recovered. Mrs. Wivine, once a journalist for 19 years, remembers. They looted everything, she says. The offices, the machines, the paper stock, even the closets. We lost everything. Everything. That's why she's on this boat, peddling clothes and fish. Hubert Kirongogi has another story. He says he's a trained computer programmer, but he can't find a job in Zaire. While others bring their families on the boat, Hubert is away from his wife and children for weeks at a time. He says he never imagined he would live like this, his family falling apart, earning barely enough to survive. Because of inflation, he says, by the time I return home with my profits, the money I have will be worth less than when I started. It's like running around in circles. As new passengers come aboard at every stop, conditions become more crowded and squalid, the competition even more intense. Life on board the Colonel Abea is a reflection of life in Zaire, a desperate and sometimes brutal struggle for day-to-day survival. Richard Kolongaka was trained as a mechanic but now sells soap because he can't find a job. He downplays the hardships. This journey is easy, he explains. We're Africans, so it's no problem for us. It's totally different for outsiders like you. But for many of those crowded together here, this kind of degradation is the worst part of this journey. It's these living conditions, says Hubert. We sleep outside next to the animals, and they're often sick. They have viruses. Odette feels the same way. I don't like to travel like this, she says. These conditions are too difficult, especially with my baby. But we have no choice. Someday I'd like to travel up in first class. But for the vast majority of Africans, anything near first class is now only a distant dream. They've been born in the decades after independence, after the bright promise of freedom faded quickly into the shadows of tyranny and corruption. Zaire is rich in minerals and fertile soils, impoverished only by rampant exploitation and mismanagement, overseen for more than 30 years by President Mobutu, whose reputation is unsurpassed for having used his country's wealth to make himself one of the world's richest men, and whose image is everywhere. But even in the wreckage of this nation, some still have their dreams. Every evening, Jacob Mumbambi runs laps to keep in shape. He told us he won third place in Zaire's national championships last year, but he says Zaire doesn't support its athletes, and he has no sponsor. He took the boat last month to Kisangani, hoping to find a way east to Kenya, where he says athletes are appreciated. But for Jacob, Kisangani was a dead end. Now he's on his way back to Kinshasa, still nurturing his dream of running in the Olympics. Like so many others here, running in circles, going nowhere. Halfway to Kinshasa, we pass another boat pushing a barge, a private operator, not nearly as big as us. We'll see several like this on the journey, a sign that competition from private operators is increasing. Activity on board now seems routine. Business continues, and everyone finds a way to pass time in the heat. The supply of beer usually runs out before the end of the journey, but for now there's plenty to go around, and it's cold. The captain doesn't need a cold drink. He's still shivering, recovering from his latest bout of malaria. So far, his first command has gone well. Passengers relax in the cool evening breeze. Another magic time on the river. But on this night, further down current, the captain's luck will change.
Next on Down the Dark River, monkeys on the menu and running the gauntlet through the cholera zone.
When your car's brakes need repair, simply replacing a part makes no more sense than tuning one key on a piano. To achieve harmony, you've got to consider how the whole system works together. The experts at Midas do. They begin every brake job with a 45-point inspection of the entire system. And because they're so thorough, you're assured of a job done right. And that's music to the ears. Midas Auto Systems experts, what can we do for you today?
The runners are getting ready.
Wir warten auf den Startschluss.
Как сенсига стато и финисига стато.
Състезателите се подготвят за старта.
Salida tan rápida.
È una partenza veloce. Edwin, llama a Coquela.
Edward se está sacando ventaja, él es el favorito.
Може би ще има нов олимпийски рекорд.
Jackson's pulling away.
From the Arctic to Zimbabwe, the world will witness the drama of the 1996 Olympic Games through the eyes of Panasonic digital technology. And for a few brief moments, 3.5 billion hearts will beat as one. Panasonic, we're more than a sponsor. We're part of the team.
This is the place to turn for complete coverage of live breaking news wherever it occurs.
This is the place for lively debate.
From the right and the left. This is the place where you can speak out and your voice will be heard.
This is the place to turn for television's most reliable coverage of business and financial news.
This is the place for lively conversation with top newsmakers and celebrities and your phone calls.
This is the place to turn for the most complete view of the events shaping your world today.
This is the place to turn for interviews,
Conversation,
both sides of the issues,
fashion and design,
entertainment news,
the world of sports,
business and financial news.
This is CNN.
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 Log on to CNN Interactive for the latest news, direct from the CNN newsroom. Rated #1 among all basic cable websites. With business from CNN FM, the new financial network from CNN. Sports scores and highlights from Nick and Fred. Fashion and interior design with Elsa. Entertainment news from Lauren and Jim. The whole world of CNN on the World Wide Web. We're here 24 hours a day at CNN.com.
During the night, pandemonium breaks loose. One of the barges springs a leak and begins to sink. People salvage what they can, but many lose their baggage in the river's strong current.
It's very bad. It's very bad. Because all those luggage who are lost here, who will pay it? I don't know even this boat have insurance. I don't know. I'm not be sure.
By morning, it's obvious the barge must be abandoned. The captain now says he initially refused to haul this barge. He thought it was unseaworthy, but he says he was overruled by his superiors in Kinshasa. By radio, those same superiors now tell him he should wait until another boat is sent to salvage the barge. They worry about thieves ransacking the vessel if it's abandoned here on the river. But the arrival of a salvage boat could take days. Meanwhile, hundreds of passengers from the sinking barge find space on the Colonel Abea, adding still more to the congestion on board. Finally, a solution is found. The captain orders his crew to strip the barge of its doors and windows and anything else worth stealing. What remains of the barge is left to the mercy of scavengers. You can't avoid noticing the monkeys. Hundreds taken on board every day. At least 4 different species sold as food. Some of them smoked and ready to eat, others killed only hours before, and some orphans to be sold as pets. Esperance Comba specializes in what is called bushmeat. She's the wife of the chief mechanic on the Colonel Abea, so she rides the boat free and buys as many monkeys as she can, at least 15, that she might sell for $1 each in Kinshasa. Eating an animal so closely related to humans might be appalling to some outsiders, including many Africans. But monkeys have always been a source of plentiful bushmeat for the people who live in this rainforest. Only now, with scientists discovering how deadly viruses can be transmitted from primates to humans, it's becoming clear how this trade in monkey meat could be responsible for outbreaks of Ebola, and, as some believe, for the original outbreak of HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Some people talk of controlling this trade as a way to prevent infection. But how could any controls be effective under these conditions? Beyond monkeys, there's also a thriving trade in the meat of endangered apes, chimpanzees, and gorillas. At least 4 baby chimps were on the Colonel Abea. Each of these babies was taken from its mother after she was killed and sold as bushmeat. There are limits to the bounty of the forest, and conservationists say those limits are now exceeded with gorillas and chimpanzees. If the bushmeat trade continues like this, they say, within 10 years, these highly intelligent animals, our closest relatives, could be wiped out across most of Central Africa. Day 6 on the river. The Colonel Abea stops in Bandaka, the last port before Kinshasa. A graveyard for boats that worked this river in more prosperous times. Like every town we see in Zaire, there are signs of decay everywhere. Bandaka is neglected, crumbling, the forest reclaiming it. Here we take on 2 more barges, already filled with new passengers and cargo. Back on the river again, no more scheduled stops until the end of the line 400 miles southwest. Before Mbandaka, we learned there were 2,200 paying passengers on board, excluding members of the military and their families who always ride free. But now the estimate is nearly 4,000 people crowded together in every available space, with maybe twice as many animals and a 2-hour-old baby boy. His mother, Bolumbu, is the wife of a crew member. This is her 9th child, her first born on the Colonel Abea, with a birth certificate to prove it. The baby's name is Longonye. It means congratulations.
11 miles an hour, 4 hours.
Crossing the equator at sunset, the air is heavy with the smell of rain. The rainy season is just beginning, and tonight we'll hit the first major storm on this journey. In the gray dawn, the boat and barges and almost everyone and everything on them are soaking wet. The squalid conditions even more wretched than before. Our mobile community on the river now looks like a refugee camp dumped on a garbage scow. The decks are slippery with swill and bilge, and so many pigs and crocs and catfish, it's almost impossible to maneuver from one side of the boat to the other. Some have compared this to Noah's Ark, but the Ark never smelled like this. Noah had only 2 pigs and 2 goats, and as far as we know, no smoked monkeys. These conditions are really not much different from what millions of others in Africa's cities and towns experience every day. Dehumanizing poverty, filthy urban slums, almost no health care or education, little tangible evidence their government cares anything about them. What do you possess as a 28-year-old man with a university education?
Nothing.
Willie Kasalakela is luckier than most. He has a degree in agricultural engineering, but his entire family is unemployed. Father, brothers, and uncles, and he has no hope for a job.
Not at all. Life is too tough.
Almost everyone we talk to on this boat puts the blame for their condition squarely on Zaire's politicians, greedy for money and power.
That's the problem of our leaders, okay? They are struggling without caring about people.
Politicians struggling for power without caring about the
only
people.
that.
Political changes are taking place. Under pressure, President Mobutu has agreed to democratic reform. But many believe it will make no difference.
Il faut un changement radical.
Jonas Colombo is 35 years old. 10 years after university, he still has no job.
Pour aspirer à
There must be radical change, he says. We must change everything. Economic system, government, politics, everything. It has to change. Jonas talks about the old days of African socialism, when graduates were guaranteed jobs and supported by the government. Not like today, when Africa is at the margins of world concern, when economic reform eliminates hundreds of thousands of jobs and international aid shrinks even smaller every year. In the cutthroat world of the global marketplace, Africa is now told to survive on its own, like millions of individual Africans who struggle every day, scraping for ways to make a living. Do you see any place in Africa that offers hope for its people?
South Africa only.
In the visions of those like Willie, a leader like South Africa's President Nelson Mandela could transform their nation and make their dream come true. On the 9th day, on a 50-mile stretch of river, no one is allowed on or off the boat. This is the quarantined cholera zone we were warned about. Soldiers are posted around the boat and barges under orders to push away anyone who approaches from shore. Some of these families are desperate to reach the boat, but they get no sympathy from those on board. Go away, you have Ebola, they shout. Since last year's outbreak of the Ebola virus in Zaire, the name is now used by many to describe any deadly contagious disease. Beyond the cholera zone, the forest gives way to grassland and savanna. The river is much broader here, swollen by hundreds of other rivers and creeks that have poured into it. A few villagers board the boat with something to sell, but the business of this journey is almost finished. The passengers are exhausted, and there's simply no room for more livestock. Finally, on the horizon, the tall buildings of Kinshasa. Boats arrive with market women anxious to climb aboard, hoping for a head start on buying goods before we reach port. Some passengers leave on these boats, headed for their homes on the outskirts of the capital. Others get ready for the mad scramble to sell their goods. For 10 days and 1,000 miles downriver, the Colonel Abeya has carried with it the hopes and dreams of thousands of people who refuse to give up. Africa itself is reflected in these hopes and dreams, in the wasted talents and skills, and in the perseverance of these people to carry on whatever their troubles. Many have spent weeks on the boat, taking the round trip from Kinshasa to Kisangani and back, and will now stay in the capital for only a few days, and then board again for another round trip. For them, this journey never stops. Their nation lies in shambles, but they know they can always rely on the river. A powerful force of nature that somehow became a symbol of darkness and foreboding to many outsiders, but is in reality, as it always has been, a bright and generous source of life.
The people we've just met possess great tenacity, courage, and irrepressible spirit. But these qualities alone are not enough to bring about fundamental change in their lives. That will depend largely on Africa's leaders, like President Mobutu in Zaire. In many countries across Africa, they promise reforms that will end widespread corruption and lead to a better standard of living. But reforms have been promised many times before, and until they actually happen, the people we've just seen will continue to spend their lives going up and down the river, a never-ending journey going nowhere. I'm Riz Khan. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Jean Meserve in Washington. We'll have an update of the top stories just ahead, and then Science and Technology Week has new pictures of a giant moon near Jupiter, plus a story on cosmetic surgery for fish. But first, here's Ted Texter with the weather. Ted?
Hi, Jean. Hi, everybody. We're in better spirits today on the East Coast because we've gotten rid of old Bertha. It's moving on up into the Canadian Maritimes, dying off. It's still making rain and some wind, though. As you look across the middle United States, the next storms to contend with are developing here now. And you can see the brighter, puffier clouds back farther south and west to the Mexican-U.S. border and then on into Texas, up into New Mexico. More showering and thunder showering. Down across Florida, some pop-ups through the afternoon you might expect. And across the west, still very dry. That is not good news. It remains hot also, and the forecast has changed very little as far as most of the western U.S. In fact, a lot of what is falling now in the middle U.S. will be pushing east, and you'll be drying out for your Monday and your Tuesday and your Wednesday and maybe even your Thursday. This is the latest from the radar returns across the country. Heavier showers across parts of the Mississippi River Valley down into the Gulf region. The brighter returns indicate the heavier raindrops, the bigger storms, and then that all pushes east, and we look forward to perhaps more heavy rain, maybe even a bit of heavy shower and thunder shower activity that might reach the severe range across areas where Bertha was yesterday. Volatility in the atmosphere there, the right dynamics, we've got it all cooking for us there. So we'll watch it carefully and we'll see if anything comes in this severe thunderstorm watch. And maybe to the west, too, we could have some heavy showers and thunder showers. Let me take you into the future now. Here's the forecast weather map. There is still rain on the east coast of the United States. Later today, maybe a little bit of shower activity through the south and the east, scattered showers. In fact, it is hoped for in quite a bit of the south and eastern U.S. The front will be on the move. This front is going to push east and then die out in intensity, almost evaporate, if you will. Another front develops more fully farther to the west. In fact, you see it sort of disappearing, the first front. This one getting a little more steam behind it, actually cool air behind it, and steam ahead of it, so more rain showers, a good possibility there. Down into Florida, more rain too. But notice out west, we've got the high pressure building on in. That clears skies up and down the Mississippi River Valley, and then farther west also more clear sky, really hot conditions through the afternoon in the south and the west, farther northward. You can see the showers that we may have coming in across parts of Oregon and then farther to the north. So overall, we're looking for very hot, dry weather in the west and still wet in the east. We'll have more for you through the day. Jean?
Thanks, Ted. We'll have the top stories just ahead, and then it's Science and Technology Week. Here's Miles O'Brien with a preview.
Some people will do almost anything for beauty, but cosmetic surgery on a fish? There are actually some good reasons to keep your fish looking fabulous. I'm Miles O'Brien, and that story is coming up on Science and Technology Week.
This is the place for something news and different in the morning. This is CNN.
Make a splash with 2 great channels in July.
It's a wonderful story.
Stars and Encore.
They want it now.
Stars, a better movie channel. And Encore, hit movies of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Don't miss it on Stars and Encore, 2 great movie channels.
Golly gee, a single tear rolls down my cheek.
You are cordially invited to attend the Star-Spangled Romance on pay-per-view.
I'm honored.
Where you can order the American president to win an American president.
Yes, sir.
Watch the movie on pay-per-view to learn how to enter for a chance to win a $1,000 grand prize or be one of 1,500 additional cash prize winners.
I'm speechless.
Don't miss the chance to bring home an American president of your own. Order this Star-Spangled Romance on pay-per-view.
I'm running this race as a breast cancer survivor.
I did this in memory of my sister-in-law who passed away 2 years ago of breast cancer.
It's an incredible energy feeling, you know, to have a women's race.
As I run by anybody with the pink visor, it's just an affirmation that we're beating this disease.
Everybody working towards the same goal, and that's a cure.
Right now, the disaster victims need your help. Your donation to the American Red Cross means they and victims of other disasters will get food, clothing, and a place to rest. Call 1-800-HELP-NOW. Let them know you care.
Prime Star salutes the American Red Cross.
This is CNN.
Welcome back to CNN Weekend. Science and Technology Week is up next, but first the hour's top stories. There has reportedly been a breakthrough in the investigation of last month's bombing in Saudi Arabia. Wire services are reporting that unnamed official Saudi sources say authorities have found the getaway car used in the attack. The sources say the car was found 6 miles from the bomb site. The State Department tells CNN it is unaware of this development and could not confirm or deny details. So far, no one has been arrested in the attack, which killed 19 American servicemen and wounded hundreds of others. There are growing fears that a 2-year-old truce between Protestant and Catholic militant groups in Northern Ireland may be on the verge of collapse. The city of Londonderry was again the scene of Catholic rioting today. Protestant riots erupted 4 days ago over police plans to block a march. Meantime, authorities are investigating a car bomb explosion at a hotel near the rural town of Enniskillen that injured 3 people. The blast occurred after 2 telephoned warnings. The Irish Republican Army denies responsibility for the attack. The architect of the Dayton Peace Accords for Bosnia will be heading back to Sarajevo Monday. The U.S. is sending Richard Holbrooke for meetings in Bosnia and later to Belgrade to urge Serbia's President Slobodan Milosevic to remove Bosnian Serb leaders Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic from power. Holbrooke retired from the U.S. government in February, but officials say he is still, quote, well-wired. A number of airports across the country reportedly are experiencing problems with a new radar system designed to warn pilots of dangerous wind conditions near runways. The Washington Post reports the system at National Airport was out of commission more than 24 times during the first half of this year. And the paper says airports in Denver, Atlanta, Boston, and Houston have also had troubles with the system. Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich today says he is pushing for a lower tax rate to help Washington, D.C. recover from its financial crisis. Appearing on ABC, Gingrich said a tax cut would lure middle-class people back to the nation's capital. As he was leaving the TV studio, Gingrich was met by about 20 protesters who confronted him on Medicare reform.
When are you going to start paying for tax breaks for the rich by cutting Social Security for our senior citizens?
That's not true. What you just said is not true. No, wait. That's not true.
I've got a mother who's 87 who's very concerned about that, and I'm not having to help her, and I can't afford to do that.
No, and would you, if you let me answer you, I have a mother-in-law who is 81. The fact is that we increase Medicare and that we keep Social Security exactly as it is.
After some more debate on Medicare, Gingrich and his staff returned to the ABC lobby until the protesters dispersed. And that's a check of our top stories. We'll have more news at the bottom of the hour. Science and Technology Week is next with a new look at one of Jupiter's moons.
Coming up on Science and Technology Week, a glacier in space. NASA provides the closest ever look at an icy moon orbiting Jupiter. Also, chopper control, a high-tech plan to keep the crowded skies safe over the Atlanta Olympics.
This is CNN.
Make them look better. We'll tell you why. We'll submerge you in details on that and much more up next. Hello and welcome. I'm Miles O'Brien. NASA's Galileo spacecraft is giving scientists something they've never had before, close-ups of Jupiter's moon, Ganymede. And the pictures are upsetting a lot of theories about the big moon's icy landscape. Mark Bernheimer reports.
They are images of Jupiter's giant moon, Ganymede, sent back from the Galileo spacecraft.
These images are fantastic. We're seeing things that are 20 times better than we've ever been able to see on Ganymede before. In fact, we could recognize something as small or smaller than a football field if it happened to exist on the surface of Ganymede.
The pictures may not mean much to the untrained eye, but to scientists they reveal fascinating detail. Craters formed by the relentless pounding of comets and asteroids, and huge faults in the moon's icy surface suggesting volcanic and tectonic activity not unlike that on Earth. Scientists here at Jet Propulsion Laboratory were thrilled by the clarity of Galileo's pictures, but they were totally caught off guard by some other non-photographic data sent back by Galileo, evidence showing that Ganymede is unlike any moon they have ever studied. When Galileo passed within 500 miles of Ganymede, it began to pick up readings suggesting a magnetosphere or magnetic field. Magnetospheres are not uncommon surrounding planets, but have never before been detected around a moon.
What we think we've found here is, in effect, a baby magnetosphere inside Jupiter's own magnetosphere, and the most logical way to produce that is that Ganymede also has a magnetic field attached to it, which is surprising.